Please don't make my mom say she did it. She didn't. The gavel cracked like a gunshot, and the courtroom went dead quiet. In the defendant's chair sat Monique Carter, a black housekeeper in a wrinkled navy uniform, still wearing bright yellow rubber gloves, as if she'd been dragged straight from a bathroom sink to the edge of prison. Across the aisle, billionaire Grant Holloway looked past her like she was a stain on polished wood. Beside him, his fiancée Vanessa Pike lounged in silk, smiling like this was entertainment. Monique had no lawyer. The prosecutor offered a choice that wasn't a choice: plead guilty and serve 5 years or fight and lose 10. Monique's throat tightened. She pictured her 7-year-old twins waiting for her 2 little hearts, who only had her. Her lips parted to whisper guilty, and the doors slammed open. 2 identical boys in worn red t-shirts sprinted down the center aisle. Ethan reached the stand first, pressing his small hands over Monique's mouth. "Don't say it, Mama." Jordan spun toward the front, pointing straight at Grant. "If she goes to jail, he should too." Grant's face drained of color. The boys had his eyes. Monique's gaze finally met his terrified, not of prison, but of the truth. And in that brutal silence, the world shifted. The simple theft case wasn't simple at all. It was a family secret cracking open in public, and a mother being forced to choose between her freedom and her children's safety. Grant Holloway didn't rush forward. He didn't even blink at first, just stood there in a tailored suit that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover, not in a room where a mother's life was being decided. His jaw worked once tight like he was biting back something he refused to feel. "Remove the children," the judge barked, voice sharp with irritation. Vanessa Pike rose halfway from her seat, clutching her designer purse as if it were a shield. Her lips curled. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, loud enough for the gallery to hear. "They're being used. She's playing you." Monique flinched at the word used, not because it stung, but because it sounded exactly like the way people talked about her when they thought she couldn't hear. She pulled Ethan and Jordan closer, those yellow gloves squeaking against their shirts, as she wrapped them up like armor. Grant finally moved. One slow step, then another. The space between him and Monique felt like a canyon money on one side, survival on the other. He stared at the twins' eyes narrowing, as if his mind was trying to solve a puzzle it didn't want the answer to. "Whose kids are those?" he asked, but his voice wasn't angry. It was thin, unsteady. Monique swallowed hard, her breath catching behind those rubber gloves, and a throat full of panic. She couldn't look at Vanessa, couldn't stand the satisfaction shining in her eyes like polished glass. Vanessa leaned in toward Grant, whispering fast, urgent. "Grant, don't let her manipulate you. This is just noise." But the courtroom wasn't noise anymore. It was heartbeat-loud silence, and 2 little boys standing between a billionaire and the woman he was determined to destroy, until their faces forced him to finally see her. The prosecutor's voice was smooth, almost bored, like he was reading a menu. 5 years if you plead today," he said, tapping his pen. 10 if we drag this out and you lose. And you will lose." Monique Carter's knees threatened to buckle. She stared at her hands, those loud yellow gloves resting on the wood hands that had scrubbed other people's messes until her skin burned hands that had stretched every dollar so Ethan and Jordan could have school shoes that fit. Her chest tightened with a familiar math rent groceries, the neighbor who'd watched the boys. How long could kindness last if she disappeared? She lifted her eyes toward Grant Holloway, begging without words. "Look at me. Just look." But he kept his gaze forward, face set like stone, as if acknowledging her would crack something he'd spent years building. "Mom," Ethan whispered, still pressed close, his little fingers trembling against her cheek. Jordan's breathing came fast, brave, furious, also terrified all at once. The judge leaned in impatient. "Ms. Carter," he said, voice cutting through the air. "How do you plead?" Monique felt the courtroom closing in mahogany marble cold light like a lid. She pictured her twins at the kitchen table at home. 2 cereal bowls, 2 small chairs waiting for her key in the lock. 5 years meant they might still remember her voice. 10 years meant they'd grow up with her as a fading photograph. Her lips parted. The word guilty rose like ash in her throat. Then she caught Jordan's eyes, those fierce, familiar eyes, and something inside her refused to die quietly. She drew one shaky breath, not to surrender, but to survive. The word never made it out. A sharp, child-sized scream ripped through the stillness, high and raw, the kind that turns every head before the brain even understands why. The double doors at the back of the courtroom blew open with a bang that echoed off the polished walls. No, 2 little figures barreled down the center aisle like they'd been launched from a slingshot. Their sneakers squealed on the floor. Their red t-shirts were damp at the collar hair sticking up in wild tufts, as if they'd been running for miles or hiding somewhere they shouldn't have been. A security guard lunged, missed, and nearly tripped over his own feet. "Mama, don't say it," Jordan shouted, voice cracking. Ethan reached Monique first. He climbed the rail with a frantic clumsiness, then pressed both hands over her mouth. Small palms shaking, determined to physically stop the confession the world was trying to pry out of her. The rubber gloves squeaked against his skin. Monique froze, eyes wide, breath trapped behind her son's fingers. Jordan planted himself in front of them, chest-heaving, cheeks flushed with fury. He turned slowly, deliberately, and lifted a trembling finger straight toward Grant Holloway. If she goes to jail, that man should go too. The room stopped breathing. Grant's expression flickered annoyance first, then something deeper like air leaving his lungs. His gaze locked onto the boys' faces. Identical. Hazel-eyed. That same sharp tilt of the brow he saw in the mirror every morning. For the first time all day, he looked at Monique, really looked. And what he saw there wasn't guilt. It was terror. Not of prison, of him finding out the truth. Grant Holloway's eyes didn't leave the boys, not even when the judge started shouting orders again. His pupils tightened like someone had turned the lights up too fast. The courtroom sound faded for him, replaced by something older, the beat of blood in his ears, the sudden memory of his own face at 7 years old. Ethan's lashes were wet, but he didn't move his hands from Monique's mouth. Jordan stood like a tiny guard dog, shoulders squared, chin lifted, daring the whole room to come closer. Grant took one step forward, then stopped like he'd hit an invisible wall. His voice came out rough, stripped of its billionaire polish. "Who are they?" Monique's throat worked behind her son's palms. She couldn't breathe right. Her eyes locked on Grant's, and for the first time he saw what she'd been hiding all morning. Not the fear of prison, but the fear of him. Of what his money could do. Of what Vanessa could do. Grant Vanessa hissed, grabbing his sleeve hard enough to wrinkle the fabric. Her smile was gone now, replaced by panic she couldn't fully mask. "Don't fall for this. It's a stunt. She's trying to trap you. She's—" "Stop." The word cut out of Grant like a command he didn't know he still had. His gaze flicked from Jordan's eyes to Ethan's mouth, to that familiar crease between the brows, to the way both boys held their ground like they'd been born fighting uphill. Something in Grant's chest cracked, quiet but final. Monique swallowed, forcing air into her lungs. Ethan's hand slid away just enough for her to whisper, voice shaking like glass. "They're mine," she said, then added the part that made Vanessa go pale. "And they're yours too." Monique's confession didn't bring relief. It hit the room like a dropped plate, sharp and impossible to ignore. Grant stared at her as if she'd spoken in a language he'd forgotten how to understand. And then, like a film cutting hard to yesterday, 24 hours earlier, Monique had been on her knees in Grant Holloway's mansion, scrubbing a marble floor so white it made her eyes ache. The air conditioning blasted like winter, numbing her fingers, even through those rubber gloves. Upstairs, Vanessa's heels clicked like a metronome of contempt. "Faster," Vanessa snapped, not even looking at her. "Grant's home in 20 minutes. I want this place shining." Monique kept her head down, jaw tight, the taste of metal in her mouth. She wasn't there for pride. She wasn't even there just for the paycheck, though she needed every dollar. She was there because time had started stealing her body. 3 months ago, a doctor had used words that sounded too calm for something so cruel, degenerative. Progressive. The kind of diagnosis that makes you count the stairs in your house like they're enemies. The kind that makes a mother lie awake, listening to her children breathe, and wonder who will braid their hair or pack their lunches when her legs won't cooperate anymore. So she made a reckless plan step into Grant's world where he couldn't ignore her. Watch him. Measure the man he'd become. And if by some miracle there was still a heartbeat left inside that expensive suit, tell him the truth before she ran out of strength to stand. But now the truth was outspilled in a courtroom forced out by 2 little boys who refused to let their mother be crushed in silence. Grant's throat bobbed like he was trying to swallow a decade in one gulp. The judge was still barking, the prosecutor still waving his hands, but Grant's attention snapped to the boys, the way a compass snaps north, hard, unavoidable. Then Ethan, the quieter twin, reached into his pocket with shaking fingers and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Not a document, not a threat. Just something soft and worn from being unfolded and refolded 100 times like a secret that needed air. She didn't steal, Ethan said, voice thin but steady. She wanted you to see this. He slid the paper through the railing toward Grant like it was an offering. Grant hesitated. His hand, manicured, ringed, expensive, hovered over Ethan's small, dirt-smudged knuckles. When their fingers brushed something electric, jumped between them. Grant took the paper, slowly opened it, and the courtroom seemed to tilt. A photograph. Sunlight. Sand. A younger Grant with longer hair. No armor of suits, no cold in his eyes, just a real smile. And beside him, laughing with her head thrown back, was Monique. Not in a uniform, not drowning in shame, but alive and bright wind in her hair like freedom. You could almost hear the ocean if you listened close enough. Grant stared until his eyes glassed over. His breath hitched. 8 years. 7-year-old twins. The math landed like a punch. Vanessa's voice cut in sharp with panic. That could be fake. Anyone can. Grant didn't even turn. His gaze lifted from the photo to Monique, and for the first time he wasn't looking at the help. He was looking at the woman he left behind, and the life he never knew he made. The photo slipped in Grant's grip, fluttering to the courtroom floor like a confession nobody could take back. For a heartbeat, the entire room hung there, frozen between outrage and awe, until the back doors opened again. A slow tap, tap, tap echoed across the polished wood. An elderly woman entered with a cane and a spine that refused to bend for anyone. Her gray coat looked worn at the cuffs, but her eyes were sharp enough to cut glass. Grant's face drained even further. "Mom," he whispered like a boy caught doing something shameful. Margaret Holloway didn't look at him right away. She moved down the aisle as the gallery parted instinctively, not because she was wealthy, but because she carried something heavier than money authority, earned the hard way. When she reached the railing, she turned toward Monique and the twins. The boys stared for half a second, then both blurted out in the same breath, "Grandma." Margaret's sternness cracked. Her mouth trembled, then softened into a smile that looked like it had been waiting years to exist. She reached out, taking their small hands in her wrinkled ones, kissing their dirty knuckles like they were precious. "I'm sorry I'm late," she murmured. "Traffic's brutal for an old turtle like me." The judge cleared his throat, flustered. "Ma'am, this is highly irregular. Identify yourself." Margaret finally faced the bench, then angled her cane toward Grant without even glancing at him. "I'm Margaret Holloway," she said, voice steady as steel. "Mother of the complainant, and grandmother of these children." Vanessa made a strangled sound from the front row, clutching her purse tighter. Margaret lifted her chin. "And I'm here to testify because a lie this big doesn't get to bury a mother in silence." Margaret Holloway settled into the witness chair, like it belonged to her cane, resting across her knees. Hands folded, steady, deliberate. The prosecutor tried to object, voice rising, but Margaret didn't flinch. 3 years, she said, eyes sweeping the room. I sat in a nursing home garden every Sunday, waiting for my son to remember I existed. Nurses gave me pills. Silence. Then Monique showed up, no camera, no agenda, just a warm hand on mine and a container of real food, because she said hospital gelatin tasted like surrender. Grant's shoulders tightened, as if each word pulled a thread from his suit. Margaret turned her head slowly toward Monique. She brought me these boys. The first time I saw them, my heart knew before my brain caught up. Same eyes, same stubborn little crease between the brows. Her voice hardened as she looked toward Vanessa Pike. And Monique never asked me for a dime. Vanessa stood abruptly, chin high, but her fingers white-knuckled the designer purse on her lap. "This is a circus," she snapped. None of this proves she didn't steal the necklace. Margaret's gaze didn't blink. "Oh, it proves something," she said, then pointed not at Monique, but at the twins. "Boys, tell the court what you saw." Ethan swallowed, then lifted his chin. "She was yelling on the phone," he said, nodding toward Vanessa. "She said she was tired of my mom and wanted her gone. Then she put the shiny necklace in her own bag, and later she slipped it into my mom's backpack." Jordan jumped in breathless. "I took it out. I thought I was fixing it." He pointed straight at Vanessa's purse like it was glowing. "I put it back, in her bag. Because stealing is bad." A hush slammed down. The judge's voice turned iron. "Officer, that purse, now!" The officer didn't hesitate this time. He yanked Vanessa Pike's designer purse from her arms as she lunged for it, heels skidding on the polished floor. The zipper screamed, open lipstick keys, a phone clattered onto the evidence table. Then something heavier slid out and hit the wood with a clean, unmistakable clink. The necklace, blue sapphires and diamonds, flashed under the courthouse lights, like they'd been waiting for this moment to speak. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. The air itself seemed to freeze, recalculating who the victim was supposed to be. Vanessa let out a sound that wasn't a word, more like an animal cornered. He planted it. Those kids set me up," she shrieked, mascara streaking down her cheeks as she reached for the jewelry, like she could swallow the truth back into her body. Grant Holloway rose slowly, as if standing cost him something. His eyes locked on Vanessa, not with confusion now, but with a cold clarity that made the gallery flinch. "Did you do it?" he asked, voice dangerously quiet. "Did you hide it and let her take the fall?" Vanessa's face twisted. "I did it for us," she hissed, desperation spilling out. "She's poor. She's a threat. Those bastards." Grant's expression snapped. The word landed wrong in the room like a slap across 2 small faces. "They're my sons," he said, each syllable sharp enough to cut. "And she has more dignity in one cracked knuckle than you've shown in your entire life." He ripped the engagement ring off and tossed it to the floor. It bounced once, tiny, worthless now. The judge slammed the gavel, furious. "Enough, Miss Pike, you are under arrest." As Vanessa was cuffed and dragged away, Monique stood trembling still in those yellow gloves, while her boys pressed against her legs, and the lie finally died out loud. The courtroom didn't celebrate. It exhaled like it had been holding its breath for years. The prosecutor gathered his papers with shaking hands. In light of the new evidence, he murmured, unable to meet anyone's eyes, "The state withdraws all charges against Ms. Carter." The judge's face softened in a way the bench rarely allowed. "Miss Monique Carter," he said, quieter, "now you are free, and this court owes you an apology." Monique nodded once, but her body didn't follow. The adrenaline drained out of her like warm water down a sink. A numb tingling crawled up her calves. Her knees trembled, then betrayed her. "Mom," Ethan's voice cracked. Grant stepped forward instinctively, but Jordan snapped into place between them, palms out. "Don't touch her," he warned, tiny and fierce. "You made her cry." Grant sank to his knees anyway, not like a king, like a man finally small enough to understand the damage he'd done. "You're right," he whispered, eyes wet. "I was wrong. I was cruel." Monique tried to stand, tried to pull her boys toward the exit, toward safety, toward the life she'd built without anyone's help. "We're leaving," she breathed. Please, just let us. Her legs folded. Grant caught her before her head hit the wood. She felt him solid, shaking, holding her like she weighed more than every dollar he'd ever made. Monique's breath came short. I can't feel them, she whispered, eyes wide with terror. It's starting. Grant's hands found her left wrist, the last yellow glove still clinging like a brand. With a careful, almost reverent pull, he peeled it off, revealing cracked skin and raw calluses. His voice broke against her forehead. I swear to you, Monique, he said, tears falling fast. I'm not letting you fight alone ever again. The cameras outside of the courthouse were already circling like vultures, but Grant didn't care. He lifted Monique into his arms, careful, steady, while Ethan and Jordan clung to his sleeves, not trusting him yet, too scared to let go. Margaret Holloway walked beside them, with her keen eyes forward, guarding the path, like a general escorting wounded soldiers off a battlefield. At the hospital, the lights were too bright, and the air smelled like antiseptic and fear. Doctors spoke in measured tones, but Grant heard only the parts that burned advanced autoimmune disease, stress-triggered collapse, months of treatment. Maybe she walks again, maybe she doesn't. 3 days passed in a blur of plastic chairs and cold coffee. Grant didn't return a single bored call. His phone kept buzzing until the battery died, and he let it. He stayed in the hallway outside Monique's room, like a man standing watch over the life he almost destroyed. Inside, the twins refused to leave her side. They slept on a pull-out couch, shoes still on, as if they were afraid the world might steal her again the moment they closed their eyes. When a nurse tried to coax them out, Jordan bared his teeth, and Ethan wrapped his arms tighter around his brother. Margaret touched Grant's shoulder. She's awake, she said softly. She asked for the boys. Grant's throat tightened. She won't want to see me. Margaret's gaze didn't soften. Then don't walk in like you own the room, she whispered. Walk in like you've got nothing but your hands and the courage to finally stay. Grant inhaled, pushed the door open, and stepped inside quietly like a man learning how to be human. Grant stepped into room 402 like the air might shatter if he moved too fast. Monique lay pale against the white sheets, eyes open, staring at the ceiling as if it was safer than looking at him. The heart monitor kept time steady, stubborn, while Ethan and Jordan slept curled together on the couch, their small bodies angled toward her like guard dogs who'd finally dozed off. Grant cleared his throat. The boys ate, he said softly, as if reporting to a judge again. I read them a story. I'm not great at the voices. Monique's lips twitched the smallest almost smile, then faded. They defended me, she whispered. Her voice sounded scraped raw. They shouldn't have had to. Grant nodded shame, sitting heavy on his shoulders. The doctor says the treatment will be long. Physical therapy. Specialists. He swallowed. I can pay for. No. Monique turned her head toward him at last, eyes tired but sharp. I won't be your charity project. It's not charity, Grant said, stepping closer, hands open like he was approaching a skittish animal. I moved half my liquid assets into a trust for Ethan and Jordan. It's theirs, not mine. Monique blinked, caught off guard, then her jaw set again. Money doesn't fix what you broke. I know. Grant's gaze dropped to the bedside tray, where a bowl of warm water and a sponge sat waiting. And then, no speech, no deal-making. He took off his watch, rolled up his sleeves, and dipped the sponge into the water. Monique tensed. What are you doing? Grant lifted her hand gently, washing over the cracked skin with a care that looked almost like prayer. His voice shook. You scrubbed my floors. You carried my mother when I wouldn't. Let me do one real thing right. In the dim light, Jordan cracked one sleepy eye and watched his father clean his mother's hands without asking for anything back. Grant didn't leave after he washed her hands. He stayed through the ugly parts. The next weeks were not a montage with soft music. They were sweat and tears and stubborn silence that sometimes broke into yelling. Monique's rehab room smelled like antiseptic and effort, Metal bars, rubber soles squeaking. Her legs trembled like they didn't belong to her. "I can't," she sobbed one afternoon, slipping, panic flashing across her face. "I'm done. I'm not whole anymore." Grant caught her before she hit the mat arms, locking around her like a promise. His voice came out rough. "Then I'll carry you. Every hallway. Every step. The rest of my life, if that's what it takes. But you don't get to call yourself useless, not after everything you've survived." Ethan watched from the corner, chewing his lip. Jordan didn't clap or smile. He just stared, measuring, waiting for the moment Grant would walk away like people always did. But Grant didn't. He learned the exercises. He learned how Monique takes her tea. He learned the boys' bedtime arguments about dinosaurs versus race cars. He showed up again and again until Dad stopped sounding like a threat and started sounding like a possibility. And here's the real lesson. Love isn't what you feel when life is easy. It's what you do when it costs you something. Pride will buy you comfort, but it won't buy you a second chance. Presence will. If this story hit you anywhere deep, tell me in the comments. Have you ever forgiven someone who truly earned it? Or are you still waiting for an apology? And if you want more stories like this, stories about redemption, family, and the moments that change everything, subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support keeps these stories alive.